Tiananmen Square. It's coming from the feel that this ain't exactly real, or it's real, but it ain't exactly there. From the war against disorder, from the sirens night and day, from the fires of the homeless, from the ashes of the gay, democracy is coming to the USA.
Hey everybody, it's Ann Beebe. Today is Monday, August 20th, 2018. I'm Barb Hammer, and that is Leonard Cohen's Canadian singer-songwriter, Leonard Cohen's Democracy, or Democracy is Coming to the USA. And this is a bit of irony because today I am talking about fascism has arrived in the USA in the form of massive censorship, specifically online censorship, and this is in reaction to last week's WordPress purge, in which Scott Creighton's American Everyman website was taken down, along with a number of others, and then his another site that he was still an admin for, Tampa 9/11 Truth, was taken down shortly after that, and he had been using that site to post a couple of videos, maybe a little bit of writing, but mainly his videos after his American Everyman site was taken down. And then there was a TechCrunch smear piece written about specifically Scott, lumping him in with a bunch of what they called alt-right blogs that were on the WordPress platform that were taken down. So he was smeared. So alt-right is code for racist, and intolerant, and everything bad and everything the left doesn't like. So they didn't name Scott in the piece, but the links led to Scott's Twitter profile. And so actually, I'm going to talk about why there's so many people, especially on the left or the fake left, who are going along with this censorship and fascism, really. And so they're going along with the censorship because they have to conform. Everybody's expected to conform, and you're supposed to go along with censorship if it's of certain views that are not popular or are offensive. So Scott is a nonconformist. He's not alt-right. He's on the real left, and that's the irony, is the one guy who's on the real left, that's the tiny minority of people, are the real left. I'm part of the real left. And he was singled out for this hit piece. And so I'm going to talk about this pressure. People go along with fascism and because they want to conform. So Scott even actually has a quote from John F. Kennedy on his Twitter page about conformity. Conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth. So Scott is a nonconformist. I'm a nonconformist. And so there's another person who I think was a model nonconformist, and that is Marlene Dietrich. She was a German actress and singer who had a career in Hollywood. She left Germany, and then she was very vocally opposed to the Nazis in Germany, and the German people treated her like she was a traitor even after the war when the Nazis were gone. And so she felt so strongly, she actually did broadcasts into Germany telling the German people to oppose the Nazis, and the Nazis were not governing in the interests of the German people. And she, towards the end of World War II, she actually went to entertain the troops, the Allied forces on the front. It was very dangerous. So She was beloved among soldiers in the U.S. Army and probably the Allied forces. And my dad loved Marlene Dietrich, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but now I do. And so she was a nonconformist. She went against her country's government, and she got U.S. citizenship. And so yeah, so she's a role model for nonconformity and opposing her country's government, but still loving her country. And she actually, her image was redeemed when she died, or right before she died. Younger Germans, they appreciated her, so she was a nonconformist, and I think people should be more like her. You know, she's very, very outspoken if she did not agree with anything. She wasn't Jewish or anything, but she tried to help refugees of the Nazis. But Sarah Perez, who wrote the hit piece against God, she's a conformist, and she just does whatever her bosses want. And I want to talk about this mindset, how people will do anything for their career, even if it's something offensive, even if something that's wrong. So she writes a lot of these pieces. So she wrote, so this is the article that she wrote, Smearing Scott. And it's really all about silencing populists, really. So this is in reaction to this censorship and fascism is in reaction to how the establishment lost control, and especially the Democrats. But actually, Hillary Clinton was the darling of the left and the right, the neoconservatives and the neoliberals. Trump ran as a populist. Doesn't mean he's a populist president, but he ran as a populist. So this massive censorship and fascism is against populism, whether it's on the left or the right. And they use this excuse of trying to silence Sandy Hook shooting deniers and that they violated the terms of service. But that was a flimsy excuse. They're just trying to silence anybody who's questioning the official narrative. Here's another article she wrote about Twitter. There's a Twitter purge. And there's another one down here about Facebook. So Facebook's been clamping down on accounts that they don't think are authentic, or they think they're Russian agents or bots. So, you know, if you don't go along with the official narrative, you're a Russian agent, you're alt-right, you know, whatever. So Sarah Perez is a conformist. She's going along with this. She does whatever she wants. So I want to talk about why people do this, the mindset, and you can study the past to understand what's going on now. So Nazi Germany is sort of a classic example of how the German people, overwhelmingly went along with the Nazis and the horrendous things that they did. And so Scott and I were actually talking about a number of studies. We mainly talked about something called the third wave. Now, the third wave was this case. It was an experiment. This school teacher in California, he was a history teacher, and he had a hard time explaining to his students why the German people went along with the Nazis. So because he couldn't explain it, he decided to show them. He had them go through, he basically turn them into Nazis. And it was very quick. Actually, when Scott and I were talking about this, he had the impression, we had different memories of what had happened, because we had watched different accounts or seen different accounts of what had happened. So Scott had the impression that this actually took a while to get the kids to think this way. He was thinking it took a semester or several weeks or several months. And I remembered it only took like 3 days. So I was actually closer to what had actually happened. It took 5 days or less, really. So this was in the 60s in California. And so it goes through. It was actually happened over 5 days. He just trained the kids to behave in a certain way, which is modeled after what the Nazis were doing to the German society. And he realized it got out of control the fourth day. So it really was after 3 days that the teacher realized he created a monster, and having these kids go through training them this way. So after the third day, he decided to stop it, and he scheduled this assembly on the fifth day. So all this happened in one school week, and he showed them what they had become, that they had become Nazis. And it shocked the kids, and there was a big controversy, and I think the school teacher got into trouble. But anyway, so it was a very good lesson that he gave these kids, a real life lesson on how people can be made to think a certain way, to go along, to conform. So in actually business studies, it's called groupthink. You might hear groupthink is the same thing, conforming. So in the workplace, it's groupthink, or in certain atmospheres, it's groupthink. So anyway, so the third wave is what it was called, the lesson. And I had watched what I had watched. I didn't know about this until maybe 10 years ago. I had watched this documentary about the third wave. It was called Lesson Plan. So this is what I had watched. And this is the YouTube version. So it's kind of long. I realized Scott had watched something called The Wave, which was 1981, I think. Yeah, it was a 1981 TV show. So it's only about 45 minutes. And it was a dramatization. So they didn't follow the exact facts, I think. So the wave, the wave, actually. And then later there's a German version called Die Welle, the wave, and it's a dramatization of a school in Germany going through this exercise, and I think it's set in the 21st century. And from what I recall, I think they actually have taught the lesson of the wave, or the third wave. They call it Die Welle. I don't know I think they show this film maybe, or they teach the kids. They use this as a teaching aid, I think, to teach the kids in Germany, or they have taught the kids in Germany about how the German people, how people will conform, even though they're told to do things or trained to behave in a certain way that's actually repugnant. There are actually a couple of other things. There's some other studies that are similar. So I found this PBS. Okay. So the Nazis, when you're talking about the Nazis, so the thing is, a lot of the Germans, their defense was, they were just following orders. So this, I think a lot of times this is the mindset. People are taught to conform, and they just go along and they follow the orders. They go along with whatever their bosses want. So this line about just following orders actually comes from Adolf Eichmann. And he was kidnapped from Argentina. He was a top SS official, not the top. He worked under Heydrich, what was his name? Anyway, the head of the SS, Reinhard Heydrich. So I think the head of the SS was Reinhard Heydrich, or he was one of the top officials, and Adolf Eichmann was just below him, and he was responsible for having the Jews deported from like France and other countries and shipped off to concentration camps. So he was kidnapped from Argentina, in the early 60s and put on trial in Israel and hanged, but he was trying to get receive clemency. So he wrote this letter, and he argued that he had simply followed orders, just followed orders. So that was his defense. They didn't buy it. So there was a study. So along these lines, there was a study. Scott and I also talked about the Milgram experiment. So there was a psychologist who conducted these experiments where he had people supposedly administer electric shocks to somebody else in another room. Now, they weren't really administering shocks to anybody. There was an actor or actors put in the other room, and you could hear them cry out in pain and then plead with the person administering the shocks not to give them the shocks, but an authority figure would be there and keep telling the person giving shots to keep doing it and to increase the voltage or whatever. And the overwhelming majority of people went right along with this. And it's explained in here that people have a sense of detachment. They don't feel like they're responsible. They don't have this sense of agency. They don't feel like they're responsible. So they have this sense of detachment. And that's why people will go along with this censorship and this fascism, because they want to conform and they just go along and they don't feel like they're responsible. So there's a disconnect. There's this detachment that they feel. And there was another study later that showed the same thing. But they actually did have people administer actual shocks, and they had both an authority figure standing there and telling them to give a shocks, or they left it up to the person to give the shock. So there's that. So there's the third wave or the wave. There's Adolf Eichmann's just following orders. There's the Milgram experiment. There's also another experiment Scott and I were talking about was the Stanford. Well, I didn't know about this one. He brought it up. The Stanford prison experiment, where they had took some volunteers from volunteer students from Stanford University, and some of them were put in the role of being a guard or prisoner, and they would, punish the prisoners, and the guards, the students acting as guards, would punish the prisoners. And it was interesting how they just went right along with this. And even though they didn't really agree with this behavior, it was not something in their nature normally, they just went along. So this is the problem now. People too willing to go along with this fascism and this censorship. And there's another thing. So in my other video, I've done a couple of videos where I've talked about how the Democrats are really the ones pushing this fascism, but they kind of blame Trump for this. But they're using Trump. They're using the Republicans and Trump as right cover to get what they want. They want fascism. They want censorship. They want dissenting voices like Scott's silenced, mine silenced, or anybody on the left, real left. And another thing what's disturbing is another thing. I encountered someone on Facebook who went along with this hit piece, this TechCrunch hit piece against Scott, and he believed what the article said, that Scott was alt-right, and they believed in silencing these Sandy Hook deniers, and he believes in silencing the alt-right. And when I looked into this person's, I argued with him, and he couldn't handle that I was actually presenting evidence contrary to what the TechCrunch article said, and he blocked me. And that is cognitive dissonance. So he could not handle the fact that I was presenting facts and evidence that were contrary to the TechCrunch article and to what he believed. I looked into his background. He looks like a Bernie Sanders supporter. So he's sort of part of the fake left. So I think he's buying into Bernie Sanders still, even though Bernie isn't really on the left. He's fake. And this person also, what's interesting, I used to think that people who went along with this, with the official narrative, were people who were more affluent. But that is not the case. This person, actually, I looked into his background. I felt a little bit bad about coming down so hard on him, but really, he's in the tech field, but I think he's struggling in life, and he's been denied Social Security disability. But what's interesting is he doesn't realize that he's going along with the status quo and what's going on, this neoliberalism. He was backing up that he argued that corporations had the right to deny service to people, to censor people. So this guy who is struggling against the system, is struggling against this neoliberalism, he's going along with corporate narrative. So that was very disturbing. So it's kind of dispelled in my mind that people who are more affluent tend to go along with this. No, everybody's being brainwashed. And it's somebody commenting on Scott's video today, someone I'm familiar with, argued it's because of public education. But no, public education has been undermined. Before, public education taught people to be critical, and public education before was not about job training and pleasing your corporate boss. So it's disturbing that everybody is being brainwashed to go along with the official narrative and go along with the censorship and the fascism, corporate fascism. It's not just the more affluent, but it's everybody. Another thing is that coming out in September, I'm talking about this right cover for the Democrats. Well, here is the propagandist, probably one of the leading propagandists for the Democratic Party, is Michael Moore. I used to like Michael Moore when he did another version of this. He did Fahrenheit 9/11, which was critical of George W. Bush and the Iraq War. But now he's putting out this bit of propaganda, really, for the Democratic Party, Fahrenheit 11/9, and that's in reference to when Donald Trump was elected. So this documentary will come out next month, and it's sort of arguing that we're seeing fascism in the U.S., and it's because of Donald Trump. So, yeah, so here's Michael Moore giving right cover for the Democratic Party, so that's disgraceful. Anyway, so this is all I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about why, people are going along with this, and why this is happening. And this is happening also coinciding with the midterms, which is what Scott had. He was warning me that there was going to be more coming down. They were going to come down more on dissenting voices in anticipation of the midterm elections. So the Democrats are worried about the midterms. And so they're determined to suppress and silence anybody dissenting, especially anybody on the real left. They really don't want to hear that. The Democrats want to be considered the real left. They are not the real left. They're not even on the left. They are the fake left. They are more right-wing. And this is the way the Democratic Party has gone. They've moved to the right, and they want to silence any dissenting voices. And so that's my video. Just want to talk about why this is happening, why people go along with this. Okay, so I will keep talking about this fascism and censorship, and it's really authoritarian neoliberalism that's going on, and both the left and the right are being targeted, but the real left is in particular is being censored, and it's all in a response to, they're trying to censor populist voices. Okay, thank you very much for listening. So share this, comment, give me a thumbs up, down, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.